Los Angeles is shocked. The last thing Ron Howard said before he broke his quiet wasn't good at all. People love the actor-turned-director, who is known for having a calm and good-natured appearance. He has now spoken out about years of secret anger, betrayal, and regret. He didn't talk about the bad parts of his life from the good times to the Oscars for decades. As of now, the truth has come out, and it's not good for one of Hollywood's most beloved legends. In the dark chain of events that happened to Ron Howard, we'll start with the sad death of his mother. Jean Spiegel Howard, Ron Howard's beloved mother, died at the age of 73 from heart and lung disease in September 2000. This was a terrible loss for the Howard family. Her death was more than just losing a parent. Ron lost someone who helped him in his life and work. John wasn't just a Hollywood star. She was the quiet strength behind one of the most recognized directors in the United States. Jean had worked in Hollywood for a long time before Ron became cool. The 1950s were the start of her playing career. In TV and movies, she mostly played small but memorable roles. Lots of people thought she was the most beautiful and kind person ever. Those qualities would later show up in her son's writing. She was in movies directed by Ron Howard like Apollo 13 and Cinderella Man, where she often played gentle mothers, which was a lot like how she was in real life. Her presence made things seem real in a way that couldn't be faked. She gave off an air of comfort and earnestness in every scene she was in. Ron often talked about how much his mother affected his creativity. His father, Rance Howard, was also an actor, and he grew up in a family of actors. Artistry was all around Ron, and Jean taught him how to understand, be patient, and tell the truth about his feelings. That's how she taught him that stories were for connecting, not for showing off. She thought playing wasn't about being seen. Ron said it was about making people feel something. His philosophy as a director was built around that idea. Ron was almost done with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, his big-budget movie version of the Dr. Seuss classic with Jim Carrey in the lead role. Time made the loss feel even more painful. His mom was proud of him and couldn't wait to see the finished movie, but she never did. Ron dedicated the movie's end credits to her memory, which was one of the most touching things he had ever done in his work. People laughed at the Grinch's antics and loved the movie's message of love and forgiveness. But they also saw a quiet ode to the woman who had shaped the director. Ron has continued to honor his mother in interviews and public events in the years since she died. He often says that she is the emotional compass of his life. He has said that every time he directs a scene that shows kindness and love toward people or spiritual growth, he can feel her there. Her impact can still be seen in his stories. Parents' strong bonds with their children, the strength of a beautiful mind, and the heartfelt lessons in Apollo 13 are all examples of her impact. That was not the end of the horror. Ronald Howard's father, Rance Howard, also died in November 2017 at the age of 89. With his death, an important part in one of Hollywood's most admired creative families came to an end. Ron was hurt by more than just losing his dad. He had lost a mentor, collaborator, and friend who had been important to him his whole life and had quietly shaped both his art and his beliefs. Rance Howard was the kind of actress who worked in a lot of different roles, knew his face, even if they couldn't always remember his name. Along with parts on Seinfeld and The Waltons, he played more than 270 roles in movies and TV shows over the course of 60 years. His son directed both A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13. His kindness, honesty, and professionalism made him a popular character on set, and not just for Ron. Many of the other people who worked with him also felt the same way. Rance was born in Oklahoma in 1928 and started his work on stage. In the 1950s, he moved on to film and TV. He married another actress, Jean Spiegel Howard, and they had a long marriage that combined work and family life. Their boys Ron and Clint were raised by them, and every day they learned how to be creative, follow rules, and tell stories. The Howard family was never a famous and beautiful one in Hollywood. They were working artists whose ideals were based on mutual respect and small-town values. Ron had more than just a father figure in him. He lived his life as an example of how to build a job by being humble and working hard. He learned from Rance to love his work, not fame, and to be honest in every job. When Ron wrote on social media that his father had died, "He stood for everything I value in the human spirit. He loves his family and his job with all his heart." Rance was in almost all of Ron's directing projects in some way, usually in small but memorable parts that were emotional. Whether he was a preacher, a mechanic, or a bystander, he gave great acts. Being real. Ron often invited his father, not because he was a nice person, but because he admired him. He thought Rance would give his movies a moral core. Ron was deep in the making of Solo, a Star Wars story when Rance died. The news hit him hard and made him remember how his emotional and professional lives had always been connected. The Howard family's creative energy had influenced many generations. The deaths of both parents, Gene in 2000 and now Rance in 2017, marked the end of an era. Rance's presence can still be felt in Ron's work, even though he has died. The themes of honesty and hard work that run through Cinderella Man Rush and Hillbilly Elegy are similar to his own. Ron has said many times that when he's on set, he can still hear his father's voice, which is calm, wise, and encouraging. Ron Howard's path from kid actor to famous director was not as easy or smooth as it might look from the outside. Ron Howard's early years were not marked by quick fame or wealth. It's a story of giving up things, toughness, and enduring love. Ron was a little boy growing up in a family of actors who were barely making it in the tough world of 1950s Hollywood. This was a long time before he became one of the most recognized directors in the business. His parents, Rance and Gene Spiegel Howard, loved performing, but they didn't always have work, and money was tight. Still, when Ron was born in 1954, they promised each other that their son would not have to be an actor full-time before he turned 5. That rule would set the tone for their early years, and see how strong they are. The Howards were offered several acting jobs for their young son Ron between 1957 and 1958. These jobs could have brought in much-needed cash, but Rance and Gene kept their word and said no. They wanted Ron to have a youth first, a time to play, learn, and grow before he was thrown into the hard life of an actor. It was the right thing to do, but it cost a lot. The family's money ran out. They couldn't pay their rent some months. To get food, they had to pawn personal things. There was doubt in every choice, but they wouldn't give up their ideals. It got worse by the end of 1958, not bearable. Rance and Gene started to talk about giving up on Hollywood when their bills reached what is now about $5,000. They loved being actors, but it didn't seem like they could keep doing it. But something inside them wouldn't give up. They thought that hard work and maybe even some trust would pay off in the end. 1959 was the year that things changed. Ron turned 5, which meant he was finally big enough to work for his family. He got his first real movie role in The Journey, which starred Yul Brynner and Deborah Kerr. His name showed up in the credits for the first time. A small event that changed my life. But even back then, it wasn't easy. People on set liked to tease Ron because he had red hair and freckles. Some crew members were mean and called him a freak with freckles, which hurt the little boy's confidence. When his dad worked on the same movie, he couldn't stand to see it. He talked to the group and almost lost his job because he was protecting his son's honor. The job paid only $12,500, which wasn't even enough to pay off their bills, but it gave them hope. The first sign that all of their suffering wasn't for nothing. The Howards had another kid that same year. Clint Howard was born on April 20th, 1959. Even though their family grew, they still had hard times. Even though they didn't have much money, Rance and Gene never let fame or lack of it affect how they raised their kids. Ron stayed in public school and had time to play baseball and ride bikes. For as long as they could, they kept him away from the harsh facts of the entertainment business. It was 1960 when Ron Howard's life changed for good. He was chosen as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show when he was only 6 years old. The show went on to become one of the most popular and long-running in American television history. But getting to that role wasn't easy at all. The casting process took a long time and was very competitive. There were over 300 kids who tried out for the part. When Ron went in front of the producers, though, something about his friendliness, honesty, and quiet charm made him stand out. He didn't act like a kid just to look like a kid. He was just one When it first aired on October 3, 1960, the show immediately hit a nerve with fans. The show, which took place in the made-up small town of Mayberry, was the kind of easy, good Americana that people were looking for during a time of cultural change. As Opie Taylor, Sheriff Andy Taylor's smart and kind son, Ron embodied the purity of youth and the loving bond between a parent and a child. There was no denying that Ron and Andy Griffith got along. Their scenes together, which were sometimes sweet and sometimes funny, were what made the show moving. Over the next 8 years, The Andy Griffith Show became an important part of culture. It had 249 episodes, and Ron was in an amazing 243 of them. It was more than a job. It was like a second home. But for young Ron, the experience meant he had to take on a lot of responsibility. It was expected of him to act like an adult, even though he was still a child. There were no real people in the stage to set the pace of a scene. Accuracy was necessary for everything. Every word and movement had to be just right. He learned how to quickly remember lines, hit his marks, and keep his eyes open during long days of filming in bright lights. In the beginning, he made around $300 a show, which in 1960 was a good wage for a child actor. By the time the show finished in 1968, he was making $1,000 an episode, which showed how important he was to the show and how professional he was for his age. Still, the lessons he was learning were more important than the money. Ron grew up in front of everyone, learning everything he could about telling stories, acting, and making movies. A lot of people saw Opie as a reminder of a simpler, happier time. But Ron's youth was anything but simple. He had to deal with the stress of being famous, meeting adults' standards, and always having to do a great job. His parents made sure he stayed in the real world. Gene and Rance told him to keep his head down, do his work, and remember that playing was just one part of life. However, Ron would later say that the event made him grow up faster than most kids his age. At the end of The Andy Griffith Show in 1968, Ron Howard was only 14 years old. He had already spent more than half of his life in front of the camera. But as Mayberry's curtain came down, it looked like Hollywood no longer had a place for him. America fell in love with Opie Taylor, the sheriff's son, because of his sweet, innocent face. No one could picture him as anyone else. It was both good and bad. Even though he had become famous, that fame now limited his future. For the first time in his life, Ron felt the pain of being turned down. He tried out for over 50 roles between 1968 and 1969, but kept hearing the same word. That wasn't right. He was too similar to a figure from a long time ago. It is notoriously hard to go from being a loved child actor to a respected young performer, and Ron was right in the middle of that battle. The phone calls that used to it was so easy that it went to other kids. The buildings were no longer there. He told his parents that he was done with acting because he felt frustrated and beaten. They told him to be patient and remember that fame comes and goes in waves. Even so, the offers that did come in were not very exciting. In 1969, he got a small job in Gentle Ben and made only $500 per episode. This was a big drop from The Andy Griffith Show, where he was making $1,000 per episode. There was more at stake than just money. There was pride as well. Ron was used to being on one of the most popular shows in the U.S. He was having a hard time showing that he was still important. He tried out for the major role in The Wild in 1970. Country, a big Disney show, and we lost it. Each chance he missed made him doubt himself even more. As soon as he got steady work again, it was with the Smith family in 1971, working with Henry Fonda. The show had 39 episodes and made him about $8,000. But reviewers didn't like it, and viewers didn't watch it much. It was over for a while, and Ron was back where he started. He was dealing with worry and self-consciousness behind the polite smile that people remembered. Even though he was scared of being ignored, he tried to keep his sense of normalcy. He went to Burbank High School, played basketball, and even averaged 12 points per game, which shocked his friends who had only seen him on TV. In 1972, Ron Howard was a teenager trying to live a normal life after having a very unusual childhood. He still felt stuck between two worlds, though. His fame made him who he was, but reality turned him down. The boy wonder who used to be famous was now just another kid looking for his next big break. What do you think about the hard things Ron Howard has to go through alone? Please tell us what you think in the box below. We hope this video was helpful for you. Kindly click like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Glad you watched and see you in the next film. Thank you.